How's it going, everybody? Sean Ross here. This is going to be my review on Tokyo Ghoul chapter 154 entitled Trace, and I believe that a majority of us did not predict that reveal we were going to get for Mutsuki by the ending of this chapter. Just getting to see that last panel, that last shot of Mutsuki with just the Kagane exploding out of her, having multiple eye kakahos attached to her Kagane, and then getting the reveal that her RC cells were suppressed to the point where it came up as a number of 3. I don't even know how that's possible. This is a new revelation that we're kind of getting within the world of Tokyo Ghoul, because we really haven't seen ghouls or half ghouls, or the quinks for that matter, being able to suppress their RC cells. Sure, we've seen drugs used to suppress RC cells, but Mutsuki seemed to be able to do it on her own somehow, and this is a big revelation, but I know it's going to catch a lot of people off guard, but in the grand scheme of things for Tokyo Ghoul in general, and especially with Mutsuki's character, this actually makes a lot of sense. So there is a lot to dive into and talk about with this week's latest chapter, definitely concerning to Mutsuki's character and her fight with Urei and Psycho, but then also on the other side of that spectrum with our second generation QS squad, with Aura going up against Higemaru and Hsiao. And FYI, Hsiao was by far my favorite character. She had by far my favorite moments of this week's latest chapter. She was absolutely amazing, and she just roasted Aura. But let's rewind back to the beginning section of this chapter, because the beginning section of this chapter actually sets up our two fights that we're going to be having for this latest chapter, where it sets up Urei and Psycho going up against Mutsuki, and then Aura going up against Higemaru and Hsiao, which I really did like, and I think most of us expected it to go this way, because it just made the most sense that the first generation of Qs with Urei, Psycho, and Mutsuki would end up fighting against one another, and the only people that could go up against Aura would be Higemaru and Hsiao. But I think what a lot of people were wondering going into this week's chapter, what was going to happen to Toka. But very quickly, Ishida basically lets us know that Toka is safe. Urei immediately just throws her a metal detector, and then Toka is basically off to the races, climbing up the Dragon Kagane and looking for Kaneki's body within the Dragon Kagane. So once Toka is able to make her way out of the battlefield, this is where our fight finally starts after a few bits of dialogue here and there between our QS members, and then it kind of splits off into our first generation QS fight and our second generation QS fight. And we don't really get to see much of Mutsuki, Urei, and Psycho until the very last parts of this week's latest chapter, but a majority of this chapter actually focuses around our second generation QS squad with Higemaru, Hsiao, and Aura, and I really enjoyed this section of the chapter, mostly due to Hsiao, because she is by far the standout and MVP of this week's latest chapter. But I also do want to shed some light onto Higemaru, because even though I feel that he is the most underdeveloped member of the second generation QS squad, he was able to hold his own very, very well by backing up Hsiao in this fight against Aura, and I loved him yelling back at Aura, trying to basically snap some sense into his closed-minded ideology, just looking at this giant grand scheme of things, you know, humans and ghouls. Ghouls are the enemy, the humans are the ones that need to destroy them, like that tunnel vision that he has of anger and frustration. Higemaru and Hsiao are trying to break him out of that, which I really did enjoy, but Aura is kind of just too far gone at the moment, that he's just driven so far down by hatred and disgust, not only for ghouls, but majority of which is towards Kaneki. But I also just want to dive just a little bit more into Aura's mindset, because this chapter not only provides us with a flashback with Aura and his Aunt Kyoko, but there's a lot of dialogue coming from Aura, a character that kind of rarely talks within the series, where we come to see where he's come from, what's been driving him forward, besides the fact that he has this vendetta against Kaneki, and how he kind of views this overall situation, which I come to understand just a little bit more, but then it also comes off very hypocritical. And as he's kind of shouting to Higemaru, it's like, how can you do this and go against all the people that lost their lives against the war against the ghouls? All of the people that got hurt, all of the people a part of the CCG that lost their lives. What will this end up doing to their memory when they see you guys joining monsters to go monster hunting? We should fight as humans only for humans. We should not fight alongside ghouls. That does not make any sense to me. I do not understand that, and as a human, I will fight with pride in who I am. That last piece of dialogue right there is when the hypocriticalness of Aura starts to seep in, because when you attach that piece of dialogue to the actions that he's doing within the panel, it doesn't really make that much sense, because he's saying as a human, he's willing to fight for that pride, but yet as he's saying that, he's activating his Kagane, his QS ability that basically came from a ghoul. He's using ghoul powers to fight his battle to preserve his pride as a human, as he's attacking Higemaru and Hsiao. And as you can kind of see, that right there doesn't really make much sense from his ideological point of view. He's so blinded with his tunnel vision, with his hate and frustration, not only towards ghouls, but specifically towards Kaneki, that he cannot see the big picture of just the peace, the truce that just came about between humans and ghouls, trying to get rid of this dragon Kagane and going in trying to save Kaneki. He's not willing to save Kaneki because he has so much hate and frustration built up inside him for what Kaneki ended up doing to Kyoko. But on the other hand, we don't really know what transpired back during all those chapters ago that actually happened with Kyoko losing her legs during the battle with Kaneki. So there's a lot of things still up in the air with that, but this piece of dialogue and just in Aura's character, I understand what he's saying, but it's his actions that really go to show how hypocritical he is as a character. But the last character that we have to talk about for this particular section alone is Hsiao. Oh boy, she was by far the MVP for this week's latest chapter and had the best moments within this section with the second generation QS squad. Everything that she did in this chapter I absolutely loved. The drop kick, the splits, everything with her fighting I was just enthralled with. I loved it. But I also noticed too, just by the way that Ishida draws her, I've noticed this from her introduction up until now, he always draws her in a very particular way that always shows off her best asset, which happens to be her ass. She has a very nice figure, and I'm not complaining for seeing it, but I don't want that to take away from the badassery that Hsiao delivered to us within this week's latest chapter. But with all of the kicks that Aura received from Hsiao with their fight within this chapter, none of that damage even comes close to the amount of damage that he received when Hsiao delivered that final piece of dialogue after she interrupted Aura during his aunt flashback speech. I love this moment because we see Aura just delivering this very heartfelt speech about seeing his aunt come home scarred after battling ghouls when he was younger, looking at his beautiful aunt Kyoko and just basically thinking to himself, it's like, I want to protect her. She doesn't deserve to have scars and bruises on her body. And he can't even complete the flashback because Hsiao just comes in, kicks him right in the neck, and then delivers this line. If you really want to protect her, what the hell are you doing here, you fuckboy? In the translation that everybody read, the Chinese word that Hsiao used actually equates to wimp, but I think instead of wimp, fuckboy is a good substitute within this situation. So that right there is where we leave off with our second generation QS fight, and we move over to the main event that many of us have been looking forward to for quite some time, the fight with our first original QS members, with Urei and Psycho going up against Mutsuki. And this honestly has been a long time coming. Urei has pushed this off, confronting Mutsuki ever since they rescued her from Torso and from the Rue Island operation. He's kind of just let her be. He didn't actually, pry into her business. And since he didn't do that, all of this is happening because he refused to actually butt in and just basically talk with Mutsuki and see what was actually going on behind the scenes. With Mutsuki going around, increasing in power, but also cannibalizing on people and ghouls. We don't really know what she's been cannibalizing on, but my best bet is a combination of humans and ghouls. And within these last couple pages, we kind of get 2, maybe 3 big reveals about Mutsuki's character within this section. The first one is getting to witness Mutsuki match Psycho's Megaton Psycho Kagane punch exactly. She basically mirrors it to a T. It's an exact replica. So that right there caught a lot of people off guard because we didn't actually see Mutsuki having the same amount of control over her Kagane that Psycho had. So that right there was the first first big reveal that we had from Mutsuki's character. But then we got a call back to 46 chapters ago, back to chapter 108, when it was first teased when Urei was talking to Dr. Shiba and heard about Mutsuki's RC levels. And as it is revealed in this chapter, Mutsuki's RC level count is 3. And I know that caught many people off guard and were like, wait a minute, how can it be 3? That is below even for a normal human. Humans usually have about like as low as 200. That is lowest it can go. So how is she able to get her RC level down to 3, but yet she was also able to manifest this gigantic fist of a Kagane? And as we come to learn, she's learned the ability to suppress her RC cells. Without any drugs, she can just do this with her natural ability. And then, as we see from Mutsuki, as she's staring at Urei, says this piece of dialogue. Urei, I couldn't care less if you died. And in this moment, we see Mutsuki just unleash her Kagane. And not only is it massive, it has multiple eye Kagane sacks, very similar to Kaneki's Dragon Kagane. So right now, many people are going to be speculating with the ending of this chapter how Mutsuki has this new ability to suppress her RC cells. And it might actually have something to do with the eye Kagane sacks that are actually on Mutsuki's Kagane. Maybe it's just being able to condense this Kagane form just so densely that, you know, the RC cells just don't even register whenever Mutsuki goes in for the test. Because remembering back to what Kimi said when she was explaining about the eye sacs on the Dragon Kagane, if you were to puncture and open these sacs on the Dragon Kagane, it would just grow and expand exponentially. And this could be the same thing that we might witness with Mutsuki, that all of these eye sacs that we see on Mutsuki's Kagane have most likely the ability to actually expand and grow her Kagane. And this could honestly explain why she has such a dense RC level that it doesn't even register and just comes up as the number 3, which honestly still baffles me. But other than that, I don't really know another possibility to explain Mutsuki's way of just suppressing her RC cells. I am really hoping that we come to learn about this new ability. Hopefully Ishida has like a flashback popping up and explains this ability, because this seems very similar to me when I watch Dragon Ball Z. Like, I go back to Trunks when he first showed up within the series and going up against Mecha Frieza and King Cold, and when they registered his power level, it was 5. The same from the farmer of the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, and then once he powered up, his power grew exponentially. So this seems very similar to me. Like the DBZ power scaling, RC cells are very similar to Ki within Dragon Ball Z, but I am very curious just to hear you guys' overall thoughts and theories on how Mutsuki is able to suppress her RC cells. But I also think another question that people might have is, how does Mutsuki even have like this much of a Kagane? How does she have so many eye sacs on her Kagane? But this all just goes back to the fact that over the course of the series of Tokyo Ghoul Re, Mutsuki has been cannibalizing on ghouls and humans. We don't really know to what extent, whether it be human or ghoul, that she was eating, but all we know is that Psycho at one point smelt human blood on Mutsuki. So we know she's been eating humans, which definitely increased her RC cell count. And in order to not get caught for all the bad stuff she was doing, she learned the ability to suppress her RC cells, so that way when Dr. Shiba came in and took an RC sample, it registered a 3, which honestly, a 3 is even more alarming if she just honestly kept it at a 200 minimum. Putting it down to 3 is just very, very weird, because even humans at their lowest point would most likely have 200 RC cells as a register. So I am very curious to see what chapter 155 holds in store for us when it comes to the fight, as we continue with our QS squad with Mutsuki going up against Urei and Psycho. So that's gonna be it for my review, guys. I am very curious and want to hear your overall thoughts, theories, and opinions on this week's latest chapter of Tokyo Ghoul. You guys can leave those thoughts down in the comments below. And just as a quick reminder, we're going to have basically a 2-week break for Tokyo Ghoul Re. So next week, do not expect a chapter, but then the following week is when we will get chapter 155. And I believe after that we'll be on another break, and then we'll have to wait another 2 weeks for the latest chapter. So don't expect a new Tokyo Ghoul Re chapter coming next week around Christmas time. Expect it the week after, around New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. So that's going to be it for me, guys. I really enjoyed this chapter. Hsiao by far MVP, and I'm really looking forward to chapter 155 in 2 weeks. So until then, 2 weeks from now, I'll talk with you guys later. See you later, guys.